Let's get to the thing that is the number one subject in the title for today's video, and that is, of course, PlayStation 6 pricing. Because, well, I mean, look, I have seen endless speculation about what the PlayStation 6 and the Xbox Helix, really, for that matter, which I'll touch on later, will cost. And I do think a lot of it's misguided. And I realized today, while I was preparing the live stream, that one thing people would probably really appreciate is if I did what I did late last year, which was do what I used to do professionally before I went on to YouTube and estimate the cost of a product. And instead of basing the cost of the PS6 and the PS6S and the PS6 handheld on prices I expect next year, which I do think will be a bit lower than this year, or prices from last year, which of course were a lot lower than this year. Let's just pretend Sony bought the materials right now. What would the PS6 cost, and why would it cost what it would cost? And this is mostly to debunk, I think, the most pessimistic takes out there, because I continue to believe that the PS6 will cost less than what a lot of people are expecting. Not everyone, plenty of people are expecting, I think, reasonable things like, I don't know, $600, $700, $800. But I'm seeing people saying it's going to cost over $1,000. And I want to kind of outline why that doesn't really make sense unless, well, World War III really does happen. Like, that's what it would take to get to those sorts of prices. And at that point, I don't think we're that worried about the PlayStation 6, right? I mean, are we really? But anyways, let me get into the slideshow here. So let me see. Here we go. And let me share this. Let me know. All right, you should be able to see it. So I'm going to have to recap a few things here before I show you the bomb cost sheet that I put together today. So first, let's go through the PS6 leaks that I've done so far for those that missed it. Don't worry, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. There's just some key things I need to make clear before I can get into it. And so this is the first real, like, specific going through all the stats PS6 leak I put out. And it was centered around the PlayStation 6 handheld, and also it tried to focus on what things will cost. Now, for those who forgot, the PlayStation 6 handheld is a 4-core plus 2-core, all Zen 6, but different flavors of Zen 6. None of them are E-cores. These 2 Zen 6 LP cores are for background tasks, system, suspending games. These 4 Zen 6 C cores are for running the games, but not as high as a frame rate as the base console will be, because it's a handheld. And a handheld that's really meant to consume, from what I've seen in documents, like just below 10 to about 15 watts. So less energy than the Steam Deck. They're aiming for efficiency. It uses a tiny 135 millimeter square TSMC 3 nanometer die that is actually going to be very cheap to produce with excellent yields. And it still is a pretty big memory bus for how small this die is. That's because it's meant for gaming. And and 16 RDNA 5 compute units. I'm not going to go through everything with the performance. Again, go watch this video if you haven't yet. It is still entirely timely. I really have no updates to it. This tells you what to expect for the handheld. All right. Then I did the PlayStation 6 home console leak, the one where this APU you're seeing on screen here, which is actually based on a real die information that I have. This is based on the, what is it? The Orion APU for the home console, and it focused on why its ray tracing is actually going to be substantially higher than people expected. Now, what's funny for me is a ton of people clowned on me for suggesting this could be in the same ballpark as the 5090 in ray tracing. When I say ballpark, will it necessarily beat it? I don't know, but like better than 5080 or something like that. That a lot of people clown on me, and then they saw Xbox announce a 10x increase in ray tracing for Helix. Now all of those people are shutting up, and they deserve to be clowned on. I think people fundamentally don't understand how much better at ray tracing RDNA 5 is going to be than even RDNA 4, let alone the RDNA 3 or 2 that are in the current gen consoles. But that's neither here nor there. For a reminder, this also has a fairly small die. Sony wants this to be cost effective. This was something called out on multiple documents that I saw. And literally it said, keep costs down, keep energy down. Part of that was actually for worrying about future regulations from the European Union, but it's all about cost. This should use less energy than the PlayStation 5. This is actually a smaller die size than the launch PlayStation 5. They are going out of their way to keep costs down. They're not even using the 7 gigahertz or whatever it ends up being Zen 6 on 2 nanometer. They're going with 3 nanometer Zen 6C because that's all they think they need. So no, this is meant to be more like the PS4, not like the PS3 or the PS5. And again, I compare the PS5 to the PS3 because it was big. You wanted to be huge so that this was a deliberate choice. This is also something I believe Xbox did with Xbox One, but it didn't really work out. But Sony deliberately made the PS3 and the PS5 huge so that it was a little awkward. You know, it was a kind of an odd shape. You had to put thought into where you would put it in your entertainment system. And they did that because they wanted people, when you walked into a living room, to see the PS5. You can't hide it. PS4, if anyone's owned one, very easy to just tuck under something. They didn't want that to be the case. Think of the PS5 as more like the PS4. They're going to make it as small as possible, use less energy than the PS5. And I think that means also less energy than what the launch PS3 used. It's about saving on money. And a lot of people would say, well, it still uses 3 nanometer. It's like, remember, the silicon in this and this is only one part of the cost. It's not half the cost. It's not a quarter of the cost of the console. It's probably like what, like a fifth the cost, a sixth the cost or something. Well, depending on what happens with RAM prices, maybe a seventh or eighth the cost. But, you know, that's only one part of it. When you make dies this small on 3 nanometer and use this type of cooling, you can make the motherboard smaller, the power supply smaller. You can design everything around it to be smaller. That's not what they did with the PS5. They designed it to be a big console, kind of just to show off. It really is bigger than it needed to be, if I'm being honest. And so there's so much you can do if you build your console around economics that will make these less expensive than otherwise. Not less expensive than like the PS5 at launch, I don't think. At least not this version here, but less expensive than like the PS5 Pro, which is also a really huge console. Anyways, let me continue. So in this video, right, the handheld one, like I said, in this video, I eventually go through a BOM cost here. And I outline what I would estimate it costs to make the PS5 at launch. And it was at launch, by the way, not at the time of the video late last year. Some of these costs would be less by then. No, it was at launch, and I got to, well, about $500. And so that was what I used as a control group. Well, if my estimate, and I kept things consistent on how I estimated pricing between these different things, if it works out for the PS5, that means that what I'm doing is probably going to be pretty accurate for the other consoles. And what I concluded was that if the PS6S, which is of course assuming the handheld APU is just used into some, you know, tiny little, do I have a mini PC next to me? I don't right now, not really. But like well, I kind of do. I got this, it's not really a mini PC, it's a strict Halo one, but like assuming there's some budget version of a console that's like only this big, probably actually half the size of this, and they just put a handheld APU in there, you know, the same amount of RAM as the handheld. Everything is the same, except it doesn't need a screen. It doesn't need a battery. It doesn't need half of the stuff that you would have to shrink to make fit in a handheld. They can be a little, you know, a little more relaxed on the motherboard and everything. You know, I think they could genuinely make something $250 to $400. At least that's what I concluded late last year. Remember, late last year, the estimate that Sony would have been paying at the time for bulk purchases of RAM for that would be like $2.50. It's definitely more than that right now. And anyways, this is really the point, right? That a cheap PS6S could have been below 400, the handheld below 550, and that the Orion below 800. But if Sony wanted to be aggressive, like price these things like they did the PS4, where it was sold at a slight loss when it came out, then it could be maybe 550. No, none of these come with disk drives, right? So just keep that in mind. But yeah, so that's what I concluded. But of course, since then, precious metal costs have gone up. You know, silicon's about the same, but like precious metal costs are up, shipping costs are up a bit, but I'll get into why that probably won't matter for PS6. And of course, RAM costs are quite a bit higher. And so I'm guessing all of you are wondering, well, what is a PlayStation 6 going to cost? Now, let me see here. Let me put this recap. Before I show you the final BOM sheet, two things. Number one, like the video. There's almost 700 of you watching. Like it. Let's get to at least 700 likes. But a few things. Like I really did scour the internet and look for like what you could assume pricing is right now. Like and this is going to blow some people's minds, but I'm sorry. Like you have to understand that consumer pricing for RAM is probably going to start dropping. I've said it was going to for a while now. I saw Linus finally admitted that's going to happen, and some of the fear mongering that prices will be up forever are starting to go away. A lot of that's because consumer RAM pricing is grossly more inflated than non-consumer pricing. Like the spot pricing that like smaller companies would almost have to pay is way, way, way higher than what like HP, Sony, Nvidia pays for bulk purchases of RAM. And that's just because the smaller companies have less ability to negotiate for bulk deals, but it's also because, Well, I don't know. A lot of them kind of think they might be able to get away with it with consumers. I've long said I didn't think they would. I don't know if anyone here remembers that live stream where I just started shouting at you guys. What would you pay? You going to pay $500 for RAM? Are you going to pay 1,000? Are you? I just said I'm not going to pay it, and that's what happened. Consumers are not paying the inflated prices, and those prices are starting to come down. But anyways, when you see this pricing here, this is really what Sony would probably end up paying if they bought the RAM right now. Now, I know this looks cheap, but keep in mind, this is about double what it was just 6 months ago. So it is not cheap to Sony. You know, it is not cheap at all, actually. And that is why they've raised prices, as you're about to see in the next chart. But and then what else do we have here? Also, note that I will be basing the PS5 control group right now on the PS5 Slim, which uses a cheaper 260 millimeter square die. And cheaper, like a lot of components have become cheaper, the PS5 Slim, despite some costs going up in other places. And if you adjust for all of this, just showing it, cost per PS5 Slim 6 nanometer die is like $82. Moving on, I wanted to show this as a reminder because you're going to see some stuff on the bomb sheet I'm about to show you that are going to make people scratch their head. And it's because I don't know. I'll be nice. I was going to say people have the memory of a goldfish, even though I've heard goldfish actually don't have bad memories, but that's how the saying goes. I will try not to be mean, but guys, this is what an NVMe SSD cost in 2020. Okay. Like, I think people forget that Sony managed to launch a PS5 for $500 during a pandemic when prices were skyrocketing. And even though, you know, prices are up right now versus 2025, a lot of things back then cost $230, $450 for a decent NVMe SSD. So just remember that, like, the world is not built around 1 year. 2025 was rock bottom pricing. And while 2027 pricing, I think, will be less than 2026, not necessarily as cheap as 2025, though, it's still probably going to be significantly better than 2020. I just want everyone to keep that in mind here. Okay. But and then, yeah, another thing, as you're about to see, tariffs basically explain still PS5 price increases. And it is, I'll swear, it's a shit show. I mean, I can't really tell you the tariff Sony's paying. I can't, because it depends what country. There's Japan, China, Vietnam, but then there's the worry that Sony would have, as I was researching, and they've said this publicly, like, well, yes, but if they move some manufacturing to Vietnam, so what? I mean, Trump randomly just raises tariffs on countries here and there. I know the Supreme Court struck down Trump's tariffs, but from what I can tell, he's still kind of ignoring their orders with some of the imports. He's still managed to kind of temporarily get 10 to 30% tariffs until, like, so it's really not gone. The tariffs aren't gone. And remember, the chaos is worse than the tariff. I'm not kidding. If you were to say to me, I'll just be honest, talk politics for a second. If you were to say to me, we're going to have a flat 10% tariff with a few carve outs for things that don't make sense, and that's to pay off the US debt, I might actually be on board with that. And I'm a pretty big free trade person. I'd be like, yeah, we have too much debt and a consistent 10%. Everyone knows what they're going to pay. That's not what's going on. It's actually worse to have some things 5% and some things 20% because no one knows what the hell's going on. And so that is really the issue here. And I kept researching and researching. And really, the conclusion I came to was that what Sony's probably doing right now is assuming 30% tariffs just to play it safe, because some of their consoles are made in some places, some are made in other places. Some components are sourced from one place versus another. You know, you open up a PS5, or I guess a better example would be a PS4. If anyone's ever upgraded their SSD or hard drive on a PS4 or PS3, you'll notice that, like, it might say a Toshiba one, it might say a Samsung one, it might say, like, all these different like Seagate, like they source from different places in different regions. And so some PS3, PS6 5s, Jesus, sorry, people, some PS5s might have tariffs that are higher than others. It's just a complete crapshoot right now. So my suspicion is what Sony's doing, from what I can tell, and they're like, if you really break down the numbers, is they're just assuming 30% tariffs until the tariffs are gone. And that's why prices are up so much right now. Right? That's what it seems like they're doing. It seems like that's what Xbox is doing too. Anyways, here we go. Here's my analysis of what's going on with current pricing. And I'll zoom in at first on the top part here for you all. I know you guys are trying to make my face not block it. There we go. So I actually try to make this interesting. This is the 2026 PS5 disc console. And I started going through the numbers, and you can see here the APU is cheaper than it was actually in 2020. That cost's actually down. I believe the board costs are actually down about 10% right now, even though motherboard costs are up. Their motherboard's significantly smaller. Cooling, same thing. I bet it's cheaper. Precious metal prices are up like 30%, but they're using like, I think, less than half the metal or something insane, like way, way, way cheaper cooling. The console even runs hotter, and I guess it still works, so I guess over time they found that they could actually just cap the temperature at a higher max temp, and then they could lower the cooling, the amount of metal to cool. I really don't think they ever needed liquid metal, by the way. That seems like that was a complete mistake for Sony, especially given the failures. But, so anyways, that's that number. SSD prices, I kind of just look for these, like spot pricing on SSDs. If you're being conservative, it's probably like 25% less or something. RAM, it's a lot less than 25% cheaper. Again, I'm going to go through this quickly because I don't think a lot of you care about how the sausage is made. I just want to briefly explain it for those who care. But like I found SSDs, Gen 4 NVMe drives that are a terabyte for like 150 basically out there right now. So if I assume a 25% cost reduction, which is probably actually like much more than a 25%, so I'm being conservative, but 25% cost reduction on that. Then you get to that, their Blu-ray drive, basically the same controller. I added 10% to the cost of that, other shipping, packaging, all that. I'm not going to change that much. Remember, even though shipping costs are up because of the war in Iran and all the chaos out there right now, the PS6 is smaller than the PS5 Slim is smaller than the base PS5 was. So the box is smaller. So that saves on shipping anyways, but yada, yada, yada. This is the best estimates I saw out there and what Sony's probably paying for their new purchases of RAM. Remember, this is about, I believe this $7 a gigabyte is about double what Sony was paying for RAM last year, but it's actually only $1 more than 2020. So if you add that all up, you get to about $507. When I saw this, I'm like, thought that'd be more. But then I remembered tariffs. And if you add the 30%, you basically exactly get to what they're charging. And so I think we should stop for a second and talk about and like just hold some space for the fact that a lot of people have been like, why is Sony raising prices? And I've said on the podcast that I believe it's just accounting for RAM increases, shipping increases, and tariffs, which are still out there. There are still tariffs they're dealing with people. Ask people who actually work in the industry. My girlfriend works at a company that does a lot of manufacturing. Tariffs are killing them. They still are. To this quarter, they still are. And that's how you get to 650. Were there to not be tariffs, they could charge probably $500 for the disc version right now. But it is the tariffs that are doing it. Even with, I'm not kidding, even with increased RAM prices, Sony could charge $500 right now if it wasn't for the stupid tariffs. So I think everyone should probably think about that for a second, that those are still really strangling growth in the economy quite a bit. But anyways, let's move on to the future. This is the control group. I got to about the price Sony's charging, so I feel comfortable with it, just like before. And let's move on to the PS6 Canis console. So let's assume Sony makes a budget version of the PlayStation 6 that uses the handheld APU, but doesn't have the screen, doesn't have to have the expensive micro motherboard, doesn't have to have all these little things that the PlayStation 6 handheld will have, which I do believe they should do given the current market. Let's assume they do that. I mean, look, guys, that APU is still going to be like half the cost, even with 3 nanometer, because it's so small and the yields will be so good. It'll be almost half the cost of the current PS5. There you go. The board, much smaller, cheaper, uses like 15 watts. A 15-watt home console? You kidding me? The cooling's almost negligible. The board, negligible. The SSD will be more. This is assuming 1 terabyte, though. Who knows? Maybe they do half a terabyte for this. I don't know. Controller, whatever. So you get to a point here where, and I am assuming 24 gigabytes. Before I assume 36 gigabytes, I'm going to assume 24 gigabytes because I do believe if Sony made the console right now, they would go with less RAM, unfortunately. But you still get to a total RAM cost here. You get to a point where if there weren't any tariffs, $399. That is what the PS6s could cost right now. And if tariffs stay in place, even then, I think they probably charge like maybe $499, $529. And that's where you get to this range. Now, I have a bunch of notes at the bottom here. And right, like one note here, note 9. I should probably move. Can you read that now? Yeah, you can. The blue here. Note that I assume Sony will be more aggressive with PS6s pricing than they would be with the Orion-based console. Why do I assume that? Well, look, the PS6 handheld is going to be cool, but it's going to be a lot faster than the Switch 2. It's going to be faster than the Ally X, the Xbox Ally X. So if they want to, they can command a premium price pretty easily. and it won't really have direct competition. I guess the Switch 2 is pretty much direct competition, but it will be a lot faster than the Switch 2. Then you look at the Orion console. I think it's going to easily be cheaper than Helix, no matter what happens with tariffs or RAM prices. And so I think they can more easily command on the higher end of some estimates. However, when it comes to a PS6S, I don't think you do a PS6S unless you make it cheap and you actually get aggressive. And that's why I say 349 to 549, because I could believe they'd take like a 10-20% loss on this one because the loss is small, right? A 20% loss on a $1,000 console is $200. A 20% loss on a $400 console is $80. So, you're still taking less of a loss per unit, and it's to get people in the door. It's to get people in the door because if they buy a $350 console and buy like one game, maybe two, they've paid for the console. So that is why I say 350 to 550. But yes, it largely depends on if tariffs are still in place or what happens to RAM. But notice I said 350 to 550. I didn't say 600. I didn't say 700. I do believe a PS6S would be less than a PS5 slim disk version. I just do. I think it would be less. The APU is like half the cost. Cooling's cheaper. Board's cheaper. And because it's a more modern architecture, its raster on paper, listen, underline this. Its rasterization performance compared to the base PS5 on paper is a little weaker, but it gets PSSR 3, and that's going to make up for that deficit like that. It's done. It now has equivalent raster performance in reality when it comes to image quality. It'll probably have double, triple the ray tracing performance of the base PS5. So any game that's using ray tracing on PS5 will get more of a boost than otherwise. And then, you factor in any game actually optimized to the RDNA 5 architecture. It's just going to look better than the base PS5. And I keep seeing people say this. How can they do that? How can they have a thing that's better, cost less? Guys, the PS4 wasn't $700. Okay. Like, this is how it's just a more modern design. Cheap. Like, I know 3 nanometer costs more than 6, but it is better. It is better. You can do more with less, and it requires less cooling, a cheaper board, everything else. So let's cover that. That's that. The handheld, I'm not going to spend much time on. It will cost less than the PS6S if the PS6S exists, that is, for obvious reasons. But I still believe they could get away if the tariffs are gone for $500. If not, $700. I think that would be a pretty killer price. I would buy it. I think a lot of people would buy it. And again, I want to just be clear about this. This is based on current RAM pricing if Sony bought the RAM right now in bulk. They haven't. They're going to buy this probably early to mid next year, maybe even Q3 next year if they think they can wait for a better deal and delay the launch to early 28. No, not 2029, maybe early 28 though. And so there's a chance you could cut this in half, right? This RAM cost here by early to mid next year if that's when they buy it, if RAM prices go down. I don't think they'll be higher. At least not the RAM Sony uses. Now, HBM5 or whatever, that'll be more expensive next year. But by then, the LPDDR5X will be pretty old. It won't be that expensive. It won't be as likely to get inflated prices as the most cutting edge stuff. That's how I should put it. But so imagine if RAM prices get cut in half or even like down 30%, all of a sudden this, 500 to 700 becomes more like 450 to 650. This becomes more like 300 to 500. Again, tariffs, I don't know, but that's why I put two prices. But the fact is, this is based on current RAM prices. Okay. And then we go to the PS6 Orion, the one everyone's freaking out about. So this is the one that's, whatever it is, 10 times the ray tracing of current gen, is going to run your games at 4K 120. I did assume only 30 gigabytes of RAM in this because I do believe if Sony bought the components now, they would probably just go with 30 gigabytes of RAM. I did assume just 1 terabyte too because I looked at how much it is per terabyte. Sorry, I don't think Sony would go with 2 terabytes if they built the console now. Now, again, maybe costs will come down next year and they will go with 2 terabytes and 30 and 40 gigabytes of RAM. Maybe. But I think if it was built right now, this is what they would go with. And even then, I don't see it getting above $1,000. Like, I still think you're looking at something that's probably 700 to 900 most likely. And it's only if tariff prices are up. It's only if like the Strait of Hormuz is closed all next year. I have to really like bend over backwards to get close to 1,000. And I think even if things were as bad as now, then it'd probably be 900. That's what I think. And so this is me, I guess, tripling down. I don't think the PlayStation 6 is going to be $1,000. If anything, any of the three big problems going on right now, let me zoom out so everyone, if you want a snapshot, this can read all of my notes. If trade was at a standstill for an entire year if RAM prices stayed where they were. I mean, if tariffs stayed where they were, I still think you're looking at probably an 899 console. And if any of those things improve, you get to like 799. If tariffs go away, which they're probably going to be struck down again, if I had to guess, by them. And that's what Sony's going to wait for. I mean, if I'm being honest, Sony's going to wait to make final decisions. Like they're going to be like just like this, waiting for tariffs to be struck down again and waiting for RAM prices to drop a bit next year. And once that happens, that's where they will make their final decisions on how much RAM, how much storage. And I just still see it as probably more likely like 699. If everything goes perfectly, it could be less than that. But I just really thought this was important for me to put out there because people are acting like it's inevitable that it's $1,000. Everything, basically, from what I can calculate here, everything has to go wrong for them to get to like 950 for the MSRP. So I don't think 1,000. I think most likely we're going to see something between $700 and $900, probably 750 without a disk drive, if I had to guess. But again, we don't know. I mean, things could improve, tariffs could go away, RAM prices could drop if the AI bubble pops, which is not an unlikely chance that it happens by the end of next year. So that is what I think. But I hope this makes people feel a little bit better about next gen, because if you actually break down the costs, it's not obvious it should be as expensive as some people are thinking. Everything has to go wrong to get even close to that. Yeah, someone here says PS6 needs to be $1,000. You have to worry about scalpers. That's an idiotic argument, people. I'm sorry. You can't just assume scalpers. I mean, if you're going to worry about scalpers, if it's 1,000, then why don't you make it 2,000? Fuck it. Let's just make it 2,000, because then scalpers are going to go 2,000. No. And by the way, scalpers have been burned a lot recently. Like, they got burned hard on the PS5 Pro, and they got burned hard on what else? Switch 2 recently, because Switch 2 is easy to get. Scalping is not a guarantee, and actually, it's been a bad business model for like the past 3 years. And I'm happy to see them get burned, but no, you can't just assume that. I would suspect that scalpers will, they'll try to scalp some PS6s. It's not going to be like the PS5. Start your own YouTube channel if you disagree. But I do want to cover that as well, because I keep seeing people just say that, and it's like, with that argument, you should just infinitely raise the prices, because there will always be scalpers. No, you select a price that you think works, and that's what you go with. Okay, at least that's how a competent business is run, not by an armchair expert. All right, let me see here. I'll answer this question and then I'll get to the next thing. Okay. So El Capitan writes in and says, with all the speculation for PS6 pricing, do you think it would be smart for Sony to wait to show the PS6 until they are ready to announce the price? Kinda, yeah, actually. Months of speculation of $1,000 plus would only hurt it. Well, okay, so you're kind of arguing the opposite, actually. You're saying months of speculation would only hurt it. Well, there's really nothing Sony can do. And actually, I don't think the speculation does hurt Sony. The longer people act like $1,000 is inevitable, the longer Sony looks brilliant if it's 700. Like, let's just face facts here. And I think similar things happened with a lot of other consoles, and like the PS5, like the PS4, people are going to be $600. The PS5, oh, it has an SSD, it's going to be 1,000. And then when Sony asked for $500 for the PS5, $100 more than the PS4, everyone lost their minds because it was a good deal. And I mean, like the same thing with the 9070 XT. I was pretty outspoken that the 9070 XT, what was the MSRP? 600, right? That it wasn't going to cost 800 or whatever was rumored. That AMD was intentionally putting out feelers to make everyone say they're the good guys when it's 600 or whatever the MSRP ended up being. Like, the longer people think the PS6 is $1,000, the more they're going to claw their eyes out when they see it's not, because it's not. It's not going to be $1,000. It's not. But I do agree with the thing you said in the beginning there, El Capitan. I think it would be smart for them to wait until they know more about what it's going to cost. And let me stop sharing my screen here. Like, if you really think about it, the reason Xbox is talking about Helix early is because they have to. I mean, it's not just gamers, which, by the way, I guess it's gotten a little better with the Helix stuff recently, but 4 months ago, Xbox sentiment was at rock bottom. Like, listening to I mean, listening to Xbox podcasts was just depressing. And so not only for that reason did Microsoft have to double down that they're making another generation, but it was so bad that it was starting to affect game developers. Everyone here who's watched the channel for a while knows that I have many sources in game development at many of the largest studios and even a lot of indie devs. And they were starting to ask me, do you think Xbox is coming out? Because we might not make an Xbox version of our game. So, like, Microsoft had to come out and announce Xbox Helix as early as possible to make sure that devs keep supporting the Series X and S. So that's very different than the PlayStation 6. Nobody thinks the PS6 isn't coming. It is. And so Sony can wait as long as they want. And so if I was Sony, I would not El Capitan announce the PlayStation 6 until you have a good idea of what things are going to cost and when you're going to be ready to launch it. A good idea. You don't have to know everything yet, but you should have a good idea. Like, you should announce it when you're like, all right, it's gonna have to cost 800, or ooh, we think we can get away with 600. Once maybe it ends up being 700, maybe it ends up being 900, but you've got to have a vague idea and be pretty confident, I think, before you announce it, because you don't want to come out and make some pitch and then surprise everyone with it being delayed or more expensive than people thought. In other words, learn from the mistakes of Valve. Learn from the mistakes of the Steam machine, where they announced their fucking console before they bought the RAM for it, which is just insane. And now they don't even know what the hell they're doing. So that is what I think Sony should try to avoid. Let me see here. I know we have another question here. What's all the hype about the PS5 Pro? It's a glorified 4060 Ti. Last time I checked, a 4060 Ti doesn't have a 2 terabyte SSD, 18 gigabytes, right? I think that's what it is, of RAM, an 8-core CPU, a motherboard, a power supply, and a chassis built onto it, dipshit. Okay? That's why people hype the PS5 Pro, because it isn't a graphics card. It's an entire device. Also, it's stronger than the 4060 Ti. Think of it like kind of a 9070 GRE. It's basically what it is in performance, a 9070 GRE. It's there's no perfect comparison. Its ray tracing is better than RDNA 2 and 3. Its AI is worse than RDNA 4, but much better than RDNA 3. Its rasters, a little lower. It's basically a I don't want to get into the CPU because it's actually stronger than people think, because it's programmed to the metal. But like, when it comes to the GPU, it's like a 9070 GRE, maybe an overclock 9060 XT, which is of course decently faster than a 4060 Ti, and also has a CPU. Blah 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 blah. So yeah, it costs what, as much as a 9070 XT, and it's like 30% weaker. Well, now it's more than a 9070 XT, but anyways. Also, let me say this too. One or Delugo, who thank you for the tip. Like, a lot of the hype for the PS5 Pro was when it was cheaper, and I now don't hype it. So that's what I would suggest, is do not hype it now because it's $900. I think you wait to PS6. I put out a whole video talking about that, but that's why. People hype it up because it is the most cost-effective way to get like 500, 700. I'm just adding up the components. I mean, how much is RAM, right? 18 gigabytes of RAM. 800, 900. It's the cheapest way to get a $1,200 to $1,500 PC. It's $900, but that is what a PC would cost right now, probably, that matches it, and that's why. So remember, it comes with 2 terabytes of storage and enough RAM to run RE9 at 4K 60 with ray tracing on. During this shortage, like, that's why people hype it up. And if you don't want it, you don't want it. All right. Let me see here. Do Nix's Cinemaverse and Team LFG unify the PS6? This is Perfect Image 89. Honestly, ma'am, I don't understand your question. Do Nix's Cinemaverse and Team LFG unify the PS6? Do you mean like unify the games library? I mean, the answer is maybe, if that's what you mean. I apologize if I don't understand the question. All right, now I'm seeing a lot of non-console tipped questions. So I think I will move on to an Xbox Helix leak. But first, I want to say an ad from Micro Center. That's right. Yet again, Micro Center is the sponsor of a Moore's Law Z live stream, and that's because I love partnering with them because they give you the best deals on components. Right now, they have a link below you can click on if you want to support the channel and also check out their desktop deals. And it's an updating link, so go back to that link multiple times in the description throughout this month. And you can see their rotating deals that they continue to update as they change. Also, you can sign up for a free 128 gigabyte flash drive at Micro Center Austin, and also a free 128 gigabyte at a flash drive at a Micro Center New Jersey, which is basically a new store opening. They've completely revamped the store. It should feel like a brand new store, they tell me. And for these flash drives, you don't need to be a new customer. You don't need to buy anything. You do need to go to the store to get it, but you don't need to buy a single thing. You can just go there and get a free flash drive. So I would recommend you do so if you're in the area. And then also there's another link below for all Micro Center news. I mean, outside of that, I don't really have much else to say. Usually I like to just kind of center myself, check out what their current prices are because they're usually pretty crazy. Oh boy, DGX Sparks for 4,500. I'll tell you what, I'll pass on that one. But let me see here. Like, let's go to the 9800 X3D, which, let's be honest, it's probably what you wanted with the 9850 X3D. CO items at Micro Center. So, they give you, so it's 440 and they give you Crimson Desert for free, which can boot on AMD hardware, unlike Intel. I'm trying to look for their RAM deals though, because I know they constantly have these huge deals. Let's see, but I mean, no matter what, like, all right, here we go. So right now, let me I'll just share my screen quick. Make sure I'm not doxing myself. There we go. Right now, if you look at this deal, $695, you get like a $400 CPU, and then like, yeah, like a $250 motherboard, 870 Extreme, and then you're just getting the RAM for free. So I know RAM are obviously inflated right now. If you go to Micro Center, you can still basically get RAM for free for what the cost of the motherboard and CPU are. So it's still really not a bad time to build. This is still much better than 2021, at least if you go to Micro Center. So yeah, thanks one more time for Micro Center for sponsoring this piece of content. And now let us move on to the next subject, which I have a little Xbox leak for the remaining Xbox fans out there, although maybe there will be more, as I think Xbox Helix does look pretty cool. Write down a timestamp here. All right. So, Xbox Helix. Now, this isn't a huge one, but I did think it was worth bringing up on the show. I'm not going to put any leak slides on screen. I'm just going to kind of summarize what's going on. So, right now, Microsoft is starting a new incentive program. They're trying to get new games that haven't come out yet to sign up and support Xbox Play Anywhere. And specifically, what they're pitching it as is targeting optimizations for the Xbox Ally X and Xbox Ally. And if you do so, they will give you a higher revenue share for the first $1 million in sales you make on their Xbox or Windows Store. And it's optional. But I think this is important because I spoke to a few devs about this, and they were a little unconvinced as of now. Basically, what it sounds like is they're saying they want to get you to optimize for their handheld. What they really want you to do is put your game on the Xbox Store. And if you do so, they'll give you more revenue for the first $1 million in sales. Although they apparently get mad if your game does not run as the should play great or play well tiers. And so here's what was said to me. Basically, the strong arming for Play Anywhere seems like more groundwork being laid for Xbox Helix, which is interesting to me. And the reason I say that, and here's where I'm going to share my screen again. So, when it comes to sales, they're not great. Like, if you break down the sales here, like $160 million per quarter for the handheld, and then you divide that by the cost of a handheld, that's at most 267,000 consoles sold a quarter. For those not keeping track, that's about as much as PlayStation usually sells in a down month. Well, not down, but not a Black Friday month where they make millions of sales. And this is if they're all Xbox Ally non-X's right here. So it's probably more like 200,000 that are being sold per quarter. So less than 1 million a year. It's not a whole lot, people. And so that's why at least one developer suggested to me that there's still probably something going on here where Xbox wants Play Anywhere to become the default. Because believe it or not, the overwhelming majority of games on Xbox Series X and S are not Play Anywhere games. A lot of developers reject it. And now I guess they're offering incentives for that. So that's interesting because I really wasn't sure how important Play Anywhere would be with Xbox Helix. Now, this is where someone might be typing already in all caps. What do you mean Play Anywhere is important? Xbox Helix is a PC. But for what I saw from their GTC announcements, you can still basically program games like it's a console. And then they have a system of easily porting it to PC. It's not necessarily that Play Anywhere is guaranteed for every game, but it sounds like they're still they want it to be a major feature of some sort. And I really think it might actually be more about trying to make the handheld seem more desirable, while also preparing for a post-console world still. There's still the sneaking suspicion to me that that is what they want to do here, that they know they can't really compete with Steam and PlayStation unless Play Anywhere is for 99% of their games. But for that reason, so they have a argument to go with them over the competition, but then also in case they do have to pull the plug on Xbox. But I just thought I'd give you guys an update there that behind the scenes, Microsoft is pushing developers really hard now and like emailing them and bothering them. Hey, why isn't your game a Play Anywhere game? You know, for some indie devs, it's because, well, we have our own launcher and we don't want to give Steam or you a cut. Other devs told me, well, if we're going to put our game on a store, it's going to be PlayStation first. And then we might put it on Xbox Series and Xbox Series X, because there's Series S and X, because there are still a decent amount of people there, and Nintendo. But then after that, we're probably going to skip the Microsoft Store on Windows, because that means our PC version basically has to have two versions that we keep patching, because you have to patch the Steam version and then you have to patch the Xbox version, or should I say the Xbox Store on PC, or whatever they call it, version. And so that's still why a lot of devs skip it and continue to. But Microsoft's trying to change that. I just thought I would point that out. All right, Ringmaster writes in, with the new AMD benchmarks that came out, is there a more specific range of your Orion and Canis IPC improvements from your original leak? More specific? No, because it's based on RDNA 5. So if you ask me, because I believe I said before, like what, Zen 6 is going to be probably 10 to 15% higher IPC than Zen 5. And RDNA 5 is going to be 10% higher IPC than RDNA 4. That doesn't change. It uses RDNA 5. It doesn't use RDNA 1, by the way, despite some people online what they said. It uses RDNA 5. It uses Zen 6, and those estimates haven't changed. So no, I don't have any changes to make to the IPC increase or the ray tracing increase or whatever. And if I did have a major change, guys, do you think there wouldn't be a video out about that already? Those videos got hundreds of thousands of views, or at least some of them have in cumulative, or even some of them individually. So I'd probably already have leaked it if I knew that, you know. Dead AI says, how do I install SteamOS on my Xbox Helix? I don't know if you can, and I still don't think enough journalists have asked Microsoft enough if Xbox Helix will run Steam. Sorry, got distracted there. All right, let me see. So I see a tipped question about Zen 6. Let me first, let's first get to 9950 X3D2. And I don't need to spend too much time on this, I don't think, but it was in the title. It is recent news. And so this is definitely a major thing that we have to cover. Where's the timestamp? There it is. So Xbox leak. This is 9950 X3D2. So the 9950 X3D2 just had its pricing confirmed. For those who somehow don't know and yet watch this channel right now, I don't know how you didn't catch this, because you probably are super focused on the news if you follow me, as I'm pretty niche. But if you missed it, you know, that's the 5.6 gigahertz 16 core that has dual Vcache. So each CCD has Vcache. AMD has not done this before with a consumer product, really out of greed, I think, just saving their yields because they didn't think they had to. And they're deciding to do this now for a couple of reasons. Number one is just to rub it in the face of Intel. Like they're just going to extend their performance lead against Intel, and because they can. That's number one. Number two, I would actually suspect AMD's testing the waters of if they should have a more HEDT focus on AM5. Because remember, Zen 6 will be on AM5, Zen 7 will be on AM5, and Zen 6 and 7 are going to push some pretty incredible multi-threading performance numbers. Also, we know that Nova Lake is probably going to have an HEDT like motherboard option, like a top chipset with more IOs from what we're seeing out there. So AMD is probably wondering, if we make an HEDT like CPU and charge HEDT like prices, do people buy it, for professional uses, not just for gaming? That's number two. Number three, and this is where I get into my thoughts on the price. Do not think for a second that $900, which is the price AMD announced for the 9950 X3D2, do not think for a second that's because it actually costs that much to make, or that relatively speaking, it costs hundreds of dollars more to make than the 9950 X3D non 2. It doesn't. They're charging $900 because they can. That's why. And if they needed to drop the price, they could. And so the third reason I believe they're launching this now is to get it out there before Nova Lake is out, have a supremely powerful flagship, and try to eat up all of the top enthusiast market share before Nova Lake is out, because Nova Lake will be a very good workstation chip, I believe. And so they're trying to get all those users to upgrade now instead of in a year from now when Nova Lake launches, or I guess a little less than a year at this point. So that people go, well, I just bought my new system like 8 months ago, I'm not going to bother. That is a tactic AMD has done multiple times before new Intel launches, is get everyone to upgrade right before the new Intel thing. And also, like, because it does not cost that much to make, they're just charging this because they're in charge. Um, I believe that it's also so that when Nova Lake launches, they have the strongest thing they can on the hardware and box charts, so that hardware and box Steve isn't comparing. He's gonna go, today we're looking at the 9950 X3D, and he's comparing that to Nova Lake, and then comparing the 9950 X3D to Nova Lake. The strongest thing AMD can make will be on the benchmark charts when Nova Lake comes out. So that's what it's compared to. And they can drop the price by them. Keep in mind, if AMD wants to, the 9950 X3D2 can be $500, and they're making a fat profit margin. Go look at how much silicon's in that compared to a 9070 XT or 9060 XT, right? Because isn't a 9060 XT, what's the die size on that? Like, let's do that math. 9060 XT graphics card. Die size. The die size is 200 millimeters squared. Okay, so that is 200 millimeters squared of 4 nanometer silicon. The 9950 X3D2 uses 270 5 millimeters squared, I believe it is, or 70, 69 I think 69 millimeters squared dies of 4 nanometer. So 140 versus 200 4 nanometer silicon. And then you have 6 nanometer silicon that's like 120. And yeah, you got to package them together, but guess what? Doesn't come with a cooler. The box they ship, is like, the box is like actually like smaller than this. Like, so way smaller than a graphics card box. Like, if they can charge like 400, $500 for a 9060 XT, they can certainly charge at least at the most less than 500 for the 9950 X3D2, even factoring in and adding the V-cache. Seriously, the V-cache is made on 6 nanometer. It's a tiny die. It's not that expensive. So just keep that in mind, that they're having this product ready so that when Nova Lake launches, they could have a $500 9950 X3D2, like a $400 9850 X3D, and then probably like a $300 $250 9700 X3D and a $200 9600 X3D. And Nova Lake's going to destroy this thing in multi-threading, but it still will have 16 cores. And if it ties Nova Lake in gaming, because remember, Nova Lake will need to have at least 40% higher performance in gaming to match this thing, which sounds about right. Like, AMD can just say, yeah, you can pay $700 for Nova Lake, or you can pay $500 for this, the same performance, and drops into AM5. You don't need to buy a new motherboard. So they are preparing for Nova Lake. In other words, they want their stuff on the charts, the best that you can have, because Zen 6 is probably going to launch a little after Nova Lake. They want to capture the enthusiast market before Nova Lake launches, which is now, and they just want something out there that they can drop the price on and try to kind of compete in the enthusiast segment in case Zen 6 just isn't ready by then, which of course there's numerous rumors that Zen 6 is delayed, so that's why they would do that. But otherwise, that's all I have to say. Anyone complaining about the price at $900, it is not because of shortages. It is not because of anything. Even with those factors in mind, they could charge far less. It is because it is a Halo product right now, and they will drop the price on it when Nova Lake launches if they need to or want to. That, just keep that in mind, that this is a vanity. Like, remember when Intel was in charge right before Zen 1 launched? Whether they charged for their 10-core Broadwell E, wasn't it like $1,900? So I can't complain about it. Just don't buy it. Just don't buy it. Russell GR78 writes in and says, "Will Zen 6 launch before the 9600X 3D?" Huh. I don't know. Uh, I don't know. My guess is no. My guess is that the 9600X 3D is like a budget thing to make you try to ignore budget Nova Lake for gaming like late this year or something. And Zen 6 desktop seems like it's not going to launch until early next year, if not mid next year at this point, because it uses the N2X node that's been delayed by TSMC. Not to mention all the shortages out there in AI that make you go, why launch that right away? So my guess would be yes, but I don't know for sure. And then let us put down another timestamp here. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on Zen 6, but there has been Zen 6 stuff in the news. Zen 6. And basically all I have to say about Zen 6 rumors are there's a certain little bird that seems to have copied my Zen 6 leaks like he always does. So I'm not going to comment on specific clock speeds, but there are notable leakers finally acknowledging the things that I've said for years, that Zen 6 is going to have radically higher clocks than Zen 5. Can we be sure it will hit Zen 7 gigahertz yet? Never can be 100% sure of anything. But I do know that's what they're targeting with Zen 6, and you're seeing other leakers confirm it. Credible ones, not the little bird guy. So yeah, look, Zen 6 is going to have way higher clocks. Benchmarks that are coming out from early silicon are showing radically higher performance per core, like 30% or more. And this thing's going to be big. And so I saw someone ask on Twitter, like, should you wait? Like, is Zen 6 going to be a big deal? Should you wait? And it's like, if you have like a Zen 4 CPU and it's working out for you, I would definitely not get a $900 9950 X3D2 and wait for Zen 6, because maybe it's a year away, but Zen 6 is going to be like Zen 2, I believe. It's going to be a massive improvement in gaming and single threading with another massive improvement in multi-threading. Honestly, I think it'll probably be a bigger deal than Zen 2. Well, it's not a bigger deal than Zen 2, because Zen 2 brought 16 cores to desktop for the first time ever, and you can't really beat that. For the time, that was just insane. But in terms of like raw gaming uplift, I think it's going to be bigger than Zen Plus to Zen 2 in gaming, and probably a similar amount of uplift in multi-threading as Zen Plus to Zen 2. And that's just because even though it's only a 50% core count increase, it's like 20-30% higher clocks. It's going to be crazy. So yeah, Zen 6 is going to be insane, and just the leaks I put out there are now confirmed. So, check those out. If you want to learn more about Zen 6, I've said much more than what some recent leakers have. What do we have here? Oh, we got Xbox questions. Okay, let me get to some of these questions here, and I'll just call this. I'll put a timestamp down. Again, people, like the video. There's over 1,000 of you watching. Let's get to over 1,000 likes. Oh, and click the links in the description with Micro Center. Even just clicking on those links helps a ton. We will title this PS6 and Helix Q&A. Let's try to roll through all the console questions, both from patrons that, of course, could submit them for free. Remember to join the Patreon. But then also, let's go with Xbox colors for this section instead of PlayStation. But then also from the tipped questions. So, making sure I don't miss anything here. Multi-Good Kid writes in, thank you for the tip, and says, should Microsoft lower the price of the Series X consoles to push unit sales, at least as we get closer to GTA 6? I don't know, man. I just think Xbox is checked out for the rest of this generation, if I'm being entirely honest. It's actually kind of a similar answer that I would have for PlayStation. I think they should both do big Black Friday sales to get rid of their existing stock before next gen. If they can afford to, who knows what happens with global trade and stuff. But otherwise, I think it's smarter to just push next gen sooner, especially with regards to Sony. I think this gen's just kind of done. So I would just push next gen more. Especially again with Sony, where you're going to have a more cost-focused console. Devious DJ Aftershock writes in, again, thank you for the tip. Given Xbox team's morale, and yeah, which is very bad from what I've heard from people who work there, by the way, and AMD employees' opinions of Xbox and Microsoft, I wonder if some of the Xbox people have tried to apply to work directly at AMD. Well, Microsoft has really good benefits for its employees, number one. They have better benefits than a lot of companies. So a lot of people don't want to leave Microsoft for that reason, even if they're scared. Additionally, you can see this out there. Other people in economics have reported on this. There's this like bear hug going on where employees feel like they're scared and threatened by their company, maybe laying them off. But because there are so many layoffs going on because of the AI boom and all that stuff, they're scared to leave their company. And so, yes, they are applying. I think a lot of people are applying to other companies right now. I've heard that. Actually, like the micro, like that. Actually, now that I'm remembering, a couple of developers told me everyone they know at Microsoft is like putting in 10 resumes at other companies a day because they're worried about Microsoft laying them off because they've done so many layoffs this year and last year, and or just over the recent years. But they're not quitting before they get a new job because they feel lucky to have a job at all. But yes, they are applying. Xbox teams, and not just that the X team Xbox, but the game devs that are under Microsoft, it's a sinking ship. Like that's how they feel. They're not going to leave without a new job, but I've heard of some of them saying they put out dozens of resumes. Like, yeah, the morale is pretty bad. Um, Spencer, and by the way, on that note, in many ways, I wonder if that's worse than the mistakes made by Microsoft with handling their community, like the blunder of raising Game Pass prices that much and not thinking there would be a backlash, all that stuff that makes Xbox gamers mad at Microsoft. That's a mistake. But you got to wonder if the bigger mistake is making it so no one wants to join your company. Because how are you going to compete with Sony and Nintendo and Steam if no one wants to work for you? It's a big problem at Intel that's getting a little better, I think, but was a huge problem a couple of years ago where no one wanted to work there. And it's like, well, why did ARC fail? Why did Arrow Lake fail? It's because everyone's applying to Nvidia and Apple first, AMD second, and then like Samsung and Qualcomm and Sony and all these other companies, fourth, fifth, sixth, until you get to Intel, And so I do think that a lot of times these companies need to think about how they treat their employees, because if the best don't want to work for you and everyone's jumping ship, how are you going to get any project done on time? Oh wait. Spencer Walker 21 writes in and says, I've always hated Xbox, all right, and been a Sony kid. All right, pony alert. But if Helix is $1,200 and Steam and my PS5 controller works, I'm getting an Xbox for the first time. Yeah, I mean, it just depends, right? Like, if Helix works really well, if it comes with like 36 gigs of RAM, which I think is just enough for a modern gaming PC, you could have like, what would that be, like 16 gigs for VRAM and 20 gigs for the system. Perfect, I think, especially if it has an Xbox mode that's actually optimized and uses less RAM than gaming on a normal PC. At $1,200, though, I think the killer price is $999 personally for them. Even at $1,200, you're getting like a $500 or $600 GPU, like a $400 CPU at the time it comes out, and then the RAM, the chassis, all that. I agree. I think for 1,200, this could be very compelling and be a real threat to basically all boutique PC builders. Like, if you're trying to sell a $2,000 pre-built desktop with a frickin' 4070 and something comes out with double the performance for 1,200, I mean, you're screwed. I mean, just in general, by the way, I'm hearing a lot of headwinds on the mom and pop PC builder shops. Like, I think a lot of them are going to go out of business, unfortunately, right now. And it's the tariffs that are doing them in, and then it was the RAM shortages where they can't get RAM but HP can, and then the final nail in the coffin might be Xbox Helix. We'll see. RR1NG Master J5 writes in, thank you for the tip. One other thing on your IPC leaks, in those old images, you showed numbers like 55 to 75% docked. Is that a prediction for a docked only, or is it the number handheld? What's handheld range if not? Well, I have to pull up my leak to even know what you're talking about. So let's go over here, open up this folder that I still haven't deleted because I keep referencing all my PlayStation leak docs to this day. Let me open this and see if I can figure out what you are talking about. Full screen and then share. All right. Here's the leak I put out. Again, people, remember, check out my PlayStation 6 leaks. but you said 55 to 75% docked. Where's that number on here? Ah, right. So this is raw raster performance right here. Raw raster performance versus a base PS5. So that would mean in handheld mode, almost half raw raster, and then in docked mode, most of the performance of a base PS5. But ladies and gentlemen, remember that's about half to 75% of the performance before you factor in PSSR 3, which gives you far more than that of a boost. So that means that I think in real world raster performance, you're going to get something like the same to 50% more image quality, assuming you're not at the higher resolutions, but it will need to be. I also have on there 1.3 to 2.6 times ray tracing. So in addition to having on in real world terms more raster performance because of PSSR 3, which the base PS5 does not have, in real world terms more raster, you might also have doubled, like triple or something, the ray tracing, which any game that uses ray tracing and then optimizes for this console is going to result in net this thing probably kind of feeling twice as powerful as the base PS5. And that's before we even talk about the CPU. I know it only has 6 Zen 6 cores versus 8 Zen 2 cores, but good lord, even if those cores were at like 4 gigahertz or something, 3.5 gigahertz, I mean, you're talking about something that's going to be a CPU that still is decently faster than the PS5 alone, and we'll be able to hold 60 frames easier. So that's what I was talking about. Thank you for the tip. Let's see here. Okay. One Order Lugo writes in again. Sorry for saying dipshit before. I believe that I said that to you right. That was too mean. I'm sorry I said that. He says PS6 does not have the memory bandwidth for path tracing 60 FPS. Well, how do you know? How will it have 5090 path tracing? Because it's a better architecture than the 5090, dude. Because it's on 3 nanometer and the 5090 is on 4 nanometer. And because 5090 is a garbage architecture for gaming. I mean, what does it have? Like a bazillion, like 10 million CUDA cores? I mean, Jesus. Like let me see here. 5090 specs. Let me go to Tech Power Up. And then let's go to 9070 XT specs, also on Tech Power Up. So, guys, the 5090 has almost 2200 CUDA cores. The 9070 XT has almost 4100. One of these is clearly more of a gaming architecture than the other. The 5090 is an AI graphics card they're trying to convince you is worth buying for gaming. It is not efficient at gaming at all. The 5090 has almost double the bandwidth of the 4090, right? Or is it over double? It's around there, right? Like it's around double at least of the 4090. Is the hey, one order Lugo. Is the 5090 twice as fast as the 4090? No. Yet it has about double the bandwidth. It's not 1-to-1. It's clearly very inefficient at gaming based on how much bandwidth it has. And that's because it's an AI card. I mean, the 9070 XT is what is it compared to the 5090? Isn't it like the 5090 is 80% faster than the 9070 XT, despite having where is it? 644. What is it? Triple the bandwidth? I mean, it's just insane. Yeah. The 5090 has about triple the bandwidth of the 9070 XT. It's only fucking 80% faster at gaming, dude. That's how, because Nvidia is horribly inefficient with bandwidth. That is how. And they are right now. Triple the bandwidth, 80% more performance. So, how does the PS6 do better ray tracing? Because it's a better architecture for gaming and it's newer. The 5090, this is weird to think about, but the 5090 is going to be like 2.5 years old by the time the PS6 and Xbox Helix launch. And I compare that to the previous gen. Compare the PS5, which launched in 2020. What was 3 years before that? It wasn't even, or 2.5 years. It wasn't even Turing. You'd have to go back to Maxwell. And the PS5 was as fast as the 1080 Ti. 1080 Ti couldn't even do ray tracing. So there's my answer. That is how. And I believe the PS5 had less bandwidth than the 1080 Ti. It's because it's newer. Newer things are better. It's always been true. And so no, that is how. And by the way, the 6090 will be faster because it's newer. It's better. That is how. I mean, come on, people. That's how. This is like the people saying like the PS6 can't be cheaper than the PS5 Pro. Yes, it can. The PS4 is cheaper than the PS3. What's the likelihood that Canis will have an OLED display? Anton K8050 writes in. Thank you for the tip. What are the chances that the handheld PS6 will have an OLED display? Well, if you would have asked me like 4 years ago, I'd have been like 90% because Sony seems to love OLED. Having said that, some of their phones and TVs have moved away from OLED recently. So I don't know. I mean, I'd kind of say 50-50. My gut is 60-40, 75%, because that's an easy way to just win, right? If I was Sony, I would target the PS6 handheld to have a 1080p 120 display. And here's what you would do. I have the specs still pulled up here next to me. At least according to a couple years ago, because my leaks are a little old, but according to a couple years ago, maybe it's faster now. Could be. Um, Handheld mode was 1.2 gigahertz, docked was 1.65 gigahertz. So that's like what, like a 30%, 25% increase in clock speeds. So what would you do with that? Well, it's very simple. On the handheld, you would make it a 1080p 120 OLED display, and you would just run PS5 games and whatever mode and 1080p, and base PS6 games you just run at like 1080p, and then turn on PSSR3 with like a base resolution of like 540p or something. Go look up what the base resolution of our Resident Evil 9 is for the Switch 2 in handheld mode. It's like 240, 360p. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. But on a small screen, it apparently looks good. So that's what I would do. I would target 1080p 120 on the handheld. And then what you would do is when you dock it, it gets 30% more performance roughly. Well, what do? You just upscale it to 4K and use a base resolution of 720p. So like the equivalent of performance mode DLSS. And it'll look good. It's not going to look as good as the base PS6 or certainly not as good as Helix, but it will look better than a base PS5 on your 4K TV easily in docked mode. And I think that's just what they'll target. I don't think they need more than 1080p. If they just give it a 1080p 120 hertz display, which would save energy, by the way. Also, PS5 games are built to work by default in 1080p, so that would make backwards compatibility easy in handheld mode. It won't have a higher resolution than the Xbox Helix, but if it's OLED, everyone will say it's better. So that's what I would do if I was Sony. 1080p 120 hertz OLED display. But I don't know. Maybe they did add 1440p support. Maybe they'll do that. I kind of think that would be a waste of energy, honestly. On a screen this big, you don't need it. Just do 1080p. It's a console, but who knows? We'll see. Let me see. And I think that's through the tip question. So let's continue rolling through more of the console questions here. All right. AI Soldier 789 writes in, what is your opinion on TSMC 3 nanometer coming to its Japanese fab? Will Sony have price advantages with a PS6 SoC directly produced in Japan? Well, there's a TSMC 3 nanometer node, right, in Arizona in the US. So it's not just there. When it comes to pricing advantages, look, Sony's better at logistics than Microsoft anyway. So if that's what you mean, well, they have a price advantage against who? Microsoft, like I guess, and definitely against the Steam machine. But I don't think it's because they're making stuff in Japan. They're just better at handling logistics in general. And the thing that would make the PS6 higher in price, I don't think is just if it's made at TSMC or not. Because aren't there? Google it. Aren't there articles out there that like it still costs more to make things at the US plant than it does at TSMC because they're just infrastructure for making stuff at fabs is just ubiquitous in Taiwan, and so it's still cheaper to make it there, despite it being an island with huge energy problems. So I think the issue is going to be if like there's still tons of tariffs and trade issues, and it's just about it's less about is there a tariff on this CPU that's made in Taiwan instead of Arizona, and more about did this heat sink I ordered from China have to get tariffed by going back and forth across a border or something? That's really where the tariff costs are going up right now. It's not really like a direct import most of the time now, I don't think. There's exceptions, of course, but that's most of the time now. TechnoLads writes in and says, do you think we could see a spring 2027 launch for the PS6 to leapfrog Xbox's launch, or do you think they will stick with the launching in November and holiday period? No, I do not. And it is because I have documents showing that they are manufacturing the PS6 and the handheld. Actually, let me put down a timestamp for this because I think I got another rant in me right now. PS6 release date. So I have documents that show in its manufacturing. It's Q2. They're manufacturing the consoles, and I'm in both of them, the handheld and the home console, in Q2 of next year. There's no way it could launch in spring. Like The earliest is late Q3, and if we're being honest, I think late Q4. I think they're not going to be rushed at all. They're going to want the best pricing they can get. I could even see us launch in spring 28. I don't think later than that, but I think that's more likely. So the answer, first of all, Technolads is no spring 2027, definitely not. All right, I will say this though. I've doubled down that they're not delaying the console to 2029. I've seen other leakers like Kepler double down on this as well. And I've seen some butthurt people that are like, you're still stupid. It's going to be delayed and the handheld's going to. There's been people saying, I bet Tom's confused. There's always this cabal apparently that I've like this there's this thought, oh, Tom has all these correct leaks, but he's probably just confused with some of the info, and that's why I don't think he's right. No, dipshit, no. I read my own info correctly, okay? And I get to talk to my sources. So if I'm confused, I can ask them a question. It's not like a parachute in my backyard just comes down and there's a leak. Like, this is through phone calls, emails, back and forth conversations. If I'm confused, I will call someone who's friendly with me and they will answer, okay? I'm not confused. And a lot of these confused, what should we call these people? The confused conspiracists, the confusal cabal. They think that maybe my information is wrong and that the handheld will launch first in 2028, not 27 for some reason, and that the base console is 29. Here's why that's bullshit. The handheld's actually being manufactured after. I don't know if I've said that publicly. It's like a month or two behind on the documents I have compared to the base console. So you're wrong. I'm not confused. The handheld isn't coming first and then they're waiting with the home console. They have contracts, and actually the home console is being manufactured like a month or two sooner. It's still like they're both Q2. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to make a difference. But if anything, the handheld would launch later, guys. If anything, the handheld would launch later, not the other way around. Bespoke something, it cut your name off. I'm guessing it's exclamation point here, though. Writes in and says, for the cost of the PSP or the PS6P, the PS6 portable, I think you're forgetting about the TCL Sony joint venture that takes effect April 2027. TCL has developed inkjet printed OLED technology that goes into production this summer. Sony will likely have access to that at cost. Ooh, that's a very good point, Bespoke. Thank you. Let me look that up. So, like, can people in the Moore's Laws Discord, if you know, write in the after video chat channel, is the inkjet printed OLED cheaper than existing OLED? Because it's a console. It's all going to come down to cost. So TCL inkjet OLED cost less than current budget OLED. And then now let's see what Gemini hallucinates. Yes, it says a 20% reduction in manufacturing costs. So yeah, I think they will. Okay, now I think it's most likely they go with OLED. Let me put down a timestamp for that. OLED handheld. Because that is something that was a blind spot of mine. That is an incredibly good point, I have to say, everybody. So it's cheaper and they have a deal with TCL. So yes, they probably will. They'll probably go with OLED. And also OLED screen sizes for phones. Hopefully Gemini knows what I'm saying. Standards. Let me look this up too. Showcasing a 6.5 to 6.89 smartphone AMOLED display. Yeah, I think they're going to. That's what they're going to do. I think they're going to go with a 6.5 or 6.9 inch 1080p 120 hertz inkjet screen. What else do they have? Tell me the full specs of the. Oh, and it goes to 165 hertz. What about okay. Are any of them 1080p 120? Let me see. No. What are they? What do we got? We got a weird resolution that's 6.5 inch. We got a 6.9 that's almost 1080p, so that would work. And that's 165 hertz. Yeah, but then there's a cheaper, like, 720p display. I don't think they'll use that. Either way, though, they could make a custom one, right? I mean, this is high enough volume, they could do a custom one, but from what I'm looking at here, yeah, I think they go with that. I think they probably go with some sort of duh, 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 duh. So what would that be proportionally? Let's see. 1080 times 1920 divided by 1156, because this is actually kind of interesting. This is the okay, but that'd be a little small. So what would that be compared to 6.9 inches? A 5-inch display? I think they go with more than that. I don't know. They can do a custom display. Uh oh, but what about the other way around? Duh. I know it sounds like I'm being very cryptic here. It's because I am. But I'm looking at their standards here, and if they just scaled up or down the patterning they clearly already built their machines for. If they did the lower one, that'd be a 9-inch display. I guess they could go with a 9-inch display. Kind of hope they don't. Oh, and that's the high response rate one. We'll see. I'm sure they can figure it out either way. My personal opinion would be, what was the Vita display? Wasn't that like 5 inches? Vita display size. 5 inches? Right. I think 6 or 7-ish is what I would want. What is Steam Deck OLED display size? 7.4? Yeah. Yeah, I would aim for a little like 7-inch, 6.5-inch, and aim for something that's in between the size of a Vita and a Steam Deck. Like more portable as the Switch 2 or a little more than that, which again, it uses the same energy or less, I think, than the Switch 2. So they can make this smaller if they really want to, but then they probably want full controller grips, so they can only make it so small. We'll see. But yeah, I think so. I think they're gonna go with OLED then. All right, let me move on. I'm losing people here. Let me see here. Let's go with this one. Chris Bezosio writes in from the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon. Thank you for your support there. Says, hi, Tom. When do you think Sony will send out PS6 dev kits to first and third party developers, especially if it comes out next year? So I haven't heard yet that they've been sending out dev kits, and I was able to hear about the Switch 2 dev kits before they were sent out, and which is interesting because some developers had them years before the thing came out because the Switch 2 took forever to come out. But if I'm just thinking about things, I would think they would have a dev kit for the PS6 end of this year or early next year. And it'd probably be kind of what they did with the PS5, where they use like an overclocked RDNA 1 to try to simulate RDNA 2, even though it couldn't do ray tracing, was the best they could give them. My guess is they would probably prepare some sort of overclocked 9070 XT, like have some yields that can hit 3.2 gigahertz locked, and say, this pretty much makes up for the IPC difference. Just assume your ray tracing will be double whatever you get in frame times. And then they'll ship that with like, I don't know, 32 gigabytes or something of RAM and then that will interface with like a CPU or something. Like that's what I would guess they would do for the dev kit early. However, if they wanted to delay the console to early 28, you almost have to wonder if what they would do is send out actual silicon, like early PS6 silicon. If it's like, let's say they manufacture PS6 Orion APUs and they start manufacturing them in April of next year. Well, okay, probably by late May, you could have your dev kits thrown together quickly and then say, hey, this launches in 10 months. This is actually the silicon. So I think if they're planning a late 2027 launch, they'll have phase 1 dev kits. They would have to probably end of this year or beginning of next year. Then phase 2 dev kits that use the real silicon, Q3 of next year. But if they're going to delay to early 28, they would probably just wait till mid next year to give you the dev kits. So you can have the real thing. But that would be my guess. Mark Smith writes in and says, does PS6 have to act as a price tier reset during its cross generation with PS5 to find success? Or will Sony just move on faster than they did with 5 and 4 cross generation that only ended recently? Thank you, Tom and Dan. Sorry, but Dan isn't here today. But I mean, I think the best thing Sony can do is make sure that the home console, so the like probably $700 whatever one, is delivers on feeling like a bigger uplift than PS5 for a reasonable price for what you're getting. So, you're getting the equivalent of like a $500 graphics card, a $300 CPU, who knows how much dollars in RAM next year. And you're like, it's a $1,500 PC that you get for $750. Yes, it's not the deal you got with the PS4 or the PS5 or Xbox Series X, but it's still hard to argue with getting the same performance half off with exclusives, that it's not probably worth it, and then deliver on an actually good experience. Like say, hey, because this thing's so much better at ray tracing, because this thing is so much better at these new features with AI and NPCs that you can't even do in your previous gen, this isn't going to feel like PS4 to PS5, where it felt like PS4 Pro again. But with a better SSD, of course, that I think makes it worth it anyways, because I just don't know how you use hard drive devices anymore, but that's neither here nor there. Because remember, the PS4 still had a hard drive like the PS3, so it's still a pretty sluggish device, in my opinion, compared to anyone who had a PC, which is why I mostly gamed on PC back then, like 99, whatever, like overwhelming majority PC, because I still found hard drive devices sucked back in 2013. Anyways, though, I'm getting off track. But like, I think that's what you do. You focus on the stronger console of your two, feeling more like a generational uplift, so that people who have the money that bought a PS5 Pro or a PS5 at launch are happy with it. And they're like, this does feel like a new gem. And then what you do with the PS6S is you do a aggressive price, because there's going to be people that have a PS4 that never buy a PS5 that want to play GTA 6, that want to play Elden Ring 2 or whatever launches with this console, and they're not going to be on PS4. And you need to say, look, I know you didn't want the PS5. You bought the PS4 for $400 or $300, or you had a PS4 Pro and the PS5 just never made you upgrade because half of the games were still on PS4 and you didn't really care. I get it, but guess what? Here's the PS6S for $350 or something, or $400, and it comes with GTA 6. And that is how you get all the 40 million or whatever PS4 people to just instantly switch to that. And then you can abandon hard drives for good, and developers don't need to worry about, last generation stuff anymore. So that's how you handle it. Like a pricing tier reset. I think the PS6S has to be a price tier reset if they make that, because you need a cheap offering to get the PS4 people. But then you just got to make sure the stronger version, the base or Orion PS6, really does feel like a bigger uplift, so that the people that aren't afraid to pay $500 for the PS5 when it came out, or $700 for the PS5 Pro, look at that and go, okay, this is a bigger uplift than last gen. I will get that as well. I think that's what you do. Let me see here. All right. Got another question from Bespoke EP. Have you seen any documentation on what the 3 big Zen 6 cores in Helix are for? I don't need documentation, my dude. He says, given that the PS6 uses 2 LP Zen 6 cores for what will undoubtedly be a much lighter OS or background task, I don't see how Helix would be able to run Windows in a console environment and run multiple storefronts and have games in quick resume with any less than 3 cores. Also, any idea how much? So it's not 3 cores, it's 11 cores. So like the PlayStation 6 technically might have 9 cores, and then the Xbox Helix will have 11. And so what they would do is the 3 fastest cores, like your 6 gigahertz, 6.5 gigahertz, 3 nanometers full Zen 6 cores, those ones will run the game threads, the main game threads. And I don't know if anyone remembers when DirectX 12 came out, but like Microsoft did all of these presentations where they showed how much usage each thread in a game does. And they found that like the first 2 to 4, this is, 5-6 years old information, or maybe even 8-9 years old, 10 years old information now when DirectX 12 was coming out. But they were like, only really the first 2 to 4 threads actually need a powerful core. The other, like the first 4 is what pushes your 5-6 gigahertz CPU hard. And then the next 4 threads, so threads 5 through 7, it would be, I think, is how a developer would describe it. Those are like, 50 to 60% as much usage. And then like the final 4 to 8 threads or whatever, those are like 25% usage. So you really only need 2 to 4 fast threads. Well, that's what Microsoft's doing. It's brilliant. It's very optimal for a gaming CPU. You don't need, 10 cores at 6.5 gigahertz. You need 3 cores at 6.5, and then the others can all run at like 4 gigahertz or something, and it won't hold back the game at all. And so if you're wondering what they do for background tasks, well, it has 2 more cores than the PlayStation 6. I mean, it's very simple. 3 of those cores, and they're Zen 6 cores. They're a lot faster than Zen 2 cores that are in the current console. You remove 3 cores from the 11, That can do background tasks. That's 6 threads for background tasks and quick resume and stuff. And then you still have 8 other cores, 3 of them really fast ones for running the games. That's what they're doing. And I think it's a really good design. The only thing I wonder is like why 2 of them aren't low power cores because I don't, but I don't know. Doesn't really matter. That'd be the only thing that might be wasteful. But then again, remember, Helix is supposed to be a hybrid device. And if it's a hybrid device running Windows, you might want all fast cores, honestly, or all non-low power cores. So not fast cores, but not slowest cores. Devious DJ Aftershock writes in, I think RDNA 5 will age better than RDNA 2, architecture-wise. Maybe. It likely inherits CDNA 5 machine learning hardware and per GDC design for next-gen DX and has work graph hardware, which is a huge deal. Yeah, I think RDNA 2 was the basis of like future generations. It could do ray tracing. It could do all this other stuff. But the difference between being able to do something and being able to do it well is quite large. I think RDNA 5 is going to be the first generation from Radeon that does everything exceptionally well, exceptionally good at ray tracing, exceptionally good at AI stuff. And it'll probably age pretty damn well, unlike these middle architectures like RDNA 1 between Vega and RDNA 2, or the middle architectures RDNA 3, 3.5, transition area ones that, age better than 2 kind of, but not in terms of relatively speaking. Let me write down a timestamp for this here. RDNA 5, DLSS 5, ARC. So let's get into the GPU stuff here. So Brian P writes in from the Patreon. Again, thank you for your support on Patreon. It says, hey, Tom, I suspect that the real goal of DLSS 5 is to have models that are game agnostic so that you can reapply them to any game. The idea would be is that you buy some Simpsons or SpongeBob or waifu model that is more universal across games. By passing skin stores and getting it straight from NVIDIA, this would be a potential revenue stream for NVIDIA and encourage vendor lock-in. Do you think that? So you're saying NVIDIA would sell different versions of their neural rendering so you could have per game tweaking to it. Like, I want my game to look like a Mario game. I want my game to look like like a Borderlands style. I want my game to look like Fork Knife. I mean, I don't know. I guess they could do that. I don't think that's the goal though. But that's true with neural rendering, replacing assets in games. You could sell versions to your account that allow you to render different, just change what a game looks like. I guess you could do that. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I don't think that's their goal though. It is interesting to think that's where mods could go though. Homeless Pirate 6 writes in, is there a possibility for a new Intel card in the future? I know I'm not the only one who can't stand NVIDIA's corporate greed. Well, it's a corporation. Hashtag Team Red. Okay. With all of that said, how much benefit will AMD see in gaming now that both Xbox and PS6 will use Zen 6? Will AMD see a large optimization advantage from this? Yeah, I mean, they've always had an optimization advantage in that regard from this. I think the bigger thing would be if devs get used to PSSR and FSR4 on all of the consoles and just start ignoring DLSS, especially if RDNA 5 was popular or something. I think that's the thing NVIDIA would worry about more, is that they couldn't really do that now because NVIDIA will just pay to put their stuff in games for devs, and FSR4 wasn't as good. But if PSSR3, if FSR5 is close to DLSS 5, especially if DLSS 5 has a big backlash from this AI crap, and then you see all of the next-gen consoles using FSR, you could have a situation where maybe devs only add DLSS if NVIDIA pays for it, but then that requires tons of driver updates, tons of QA, and I think that's what I'd be more worried about if I was NVIDIA, not really like optimizing for Zen 6 or something. Woody Chang writes in, given the ARC news about initially not being supported by Crimson Desert, right, and I want to be clear about this ARC Crimson Desert stuff, because I've seen some people like go, oh, well, they said they're going to port it to ARC, so it doesn't matter anymore. There was one message, though, from the Crimson Desert devs, right, that said, ask for a refund when people complained about it not running on ARC. That they didn't say, we'll patch it soon. They didn't say we're working on it. They said, ask for a refund. Yes, later they said they'll work on it. But what that means is, like a week ago is when they started working on ARC support. They started from scratch, that means. They wouldn't have said to ask for a refund unless they had no plans to do it at first. And from that point of view, I have no idea when it's going to work on ARC. I mean, right? It could be months. No one may even care about this game by the time it's done. And so let me see here. He says, I wonder what this does to the value proposition for Panther Lake. One of the biggest things going for it was efficient, decent, good integrated graphics, but that becomes less valuable if we see more devs openly declare that they are not even going to support ARC in the first place. Maybe this will be a one off regarding a hotly anticipated title, but this makes Strix Halo look better in comparison. Similar price for a product that will have better support. And although it may have about the same or lower performance on battery, if you plug it in, it has a lot more performance, even if you have to use janky implementations of FSR4 with int 8. Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing, and it goes to show if AMD had full support of the latest FSR and Strix Halo, they'd probably have a layup here and people would start saying, don't get Panther Lake. And yet there's still reasons to get Panther Lake over it. I will say it's not just that though. If you look it up, Intel drops support for Unity. Like Intel has discontinued official support for XE super sampling for Unity games. And look at this, biggest Unity games. That's because they're Pokemon Go. That's funny. But like, what are the biggest Unity games here? Like, I will say, how often is Unity still used? Because Unity's kind of destroyed themselves, right? Like people, the Forest, a lot of indie games, some Deus Ex game. What's that? Yeah, so it's not like a lot of the biggest AAA games use it, though. I have to admit. So, them pulling support for Unity is another example of I would worry about getting an ARC product. Having said that, when I look at the biggest Unity games, not a lot of them are the ones you're gonna need to run ray tracing or something, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know. I'll say that yes, this is a problem. And if you had one more game pop up that just directly didn't have ARC support, that would be a huge red flag again. And I will continue to say that, like, if your primary use is for gaming and gaming plugged in, Strix Halo is still probably a better choice than Panther Lake. But and also because it's cheaper. Which also, did you guys see that a mini PC company, I think it was GM Tech, put out a Panther Lake mini PC, and it costs more than the Strix Halo one. So Panther Lake costs more to manufacture than Strix Halo. So if you're doing purely gaming, Strix Halo costs less. You'll get more support in terms of booting up the game. It is probably the better bet long term for having good support for gaming. If it's half gaming, gaming isn't everything. You're okay if one game isn't there. Panther Lake's still the better, more advanced, newer APU. But yeah, it does give me pause. I do not like seeing that. It's pretty bad. It's pretty damning. I wouldn't say I'm running for the hills and not recommending it at all yet, though. Let me see here. Okay, here's another GPU question. And let me make sure I didn't miss any other one. Nope. Vinicius Silverstra 0 says, I don't know if this has already been asked or if you said something about this at any point, but could DLSS 5 just be an early face save if their next gen is 50% AI and doesn't perform as expected? Yes. And I've said that's what DLSS 5 could be. DLSS 5 could be that they know the 6090 is going to use a third of its silicon or more for AI. Then in terms of raw ray tracing, raw raster, big RDNA 5 just wins. And so they need to use the AI silicon for something to claim they're better. There's definitely a chance that's true. Too soon to say for sure, but that's definitely a chance. Devious DJ Aftershock says a certain leaker is claiming AT0 was canned. Yeah, I mean, look, I haven't asked anyone about RDNA 5 recently, but I would find that a little unlikely if they were going to do that because they need that for AI, But Spencer Walker 21 writes in and says, I'm still hyped for Steam Machine. I think the release will be pushed to Q4, though, with a lot of software work done for $500, but with FSR4 to try to justify it. With a creepy 666 tip. Thank you, though, either way. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I'd be curious. Type in below. What do you guys expect? Is the Steam Machine coming out? What price do you think it will be? Do you even care anymore? Like, I wish, can you do polls? What's this? What's this here? Insert ad delay. Oh, they added new features here too. Add stream marker. No. I don't know. I wish I could do a poll live on here. because I'm curious how much as you care. Because one of my biggest videos last year was about the Steam Machine, and unfortunately, I've kind of lost my hype for it. I mean, the fact that they just fumbled it this badly so far tells me that I probably just shouldn't get my hopes up for it anymore. Boosie talks that ish. Okay. I would imagine Sony will use true RGB for handheld screen. True RGB. I don't know what you mean. If you mean like a screen technology, or they will have RGB lights. I kind of would be surprised if they had a bunch of RGB lights, to be honest. Who needs game dev anymore? Well, if you want a game, you kind of need that there. If it's less than nothing, okay, I'm looking at. Did anyone write in about what they think about the Steam Machine here? Let's see what we got. Ian Mark Smith says, I'm still hyped about the existence of the Steam Machine, but I decided to build my own from parts I have from other PCs and stuff I found on sale. Probably a good choice instead of waiting for something that might not even come out at this point. I can see him purchase a $700 Steam Machine for sure. I just think that's too much money, man. Will the PS6 use the same exact detachable disk drive as the PS5? I don't know. It'd be cool if it did, though. All right. Not a lot of Steam Machine input. So let us move on to some CPU questions. We've already been going for almost 2 hours here. You guys got a lot of questions. I guess it's been a big month, though, in terms of news. But 30. All right. So we'll title this Zen 6, Nova Lake, Arrow Lake R versus Zen 5. Okay. So Magnetic Manuel writes in and says, Manuel writes, I should say. I think that's what you would pronounce that. And asks, rumors are beginning to swirl about shortages. And, well, they've been swirling for a while. And long lead times for server CPUs. Oh, I see. Lisa Sue says that AI customers are excited about Zen 6 Venice. Sure, bet they are. Zen 6 desktop performance is expected to be a significant improvement from Zen 5. Yeah, it's going to be wildly faster. On the popular AM5 platform that many people already have, AMD knows they will still have a desirable product with limited supply. So, I mean, does that mean the launch is going to be terrible? No, it doesn't. Look, if AMD was launching Zen 6 next month with inflated RAM prices during AI shortages, I would say, yep, not going to be easy to get, but they charge an arm and a leg. But from all that we can tell, they're probably going to launch desktop Zen 6 early or mid next year. And by then, you'll have a lot of customers like, let me see, TSMC node roadmap. So, what's the latest one? Oh, perfect. Let me open this, and then let me share my screen. All right, here we go. Make sure I am not doxing myself here. Let me do F11. All right, so look at this. Like, I need to zoom out, unfortunately, because of where they put the years, but the 3 nanometer was 22, 2 nanometer is 2025, which means products with it are coming out this year. Venice is going to use 2 nanometer here. Then A16 is right about there. N2X is here, so that's why it will be mid or early 27 when we'll get desktop Zen 6 probably. Then A14 is 2028. So that means we're going to probably start getting A16 products probably early 28. And I think that's important to show everybody, because AMD is using the leading edge less and less for the consumer stuff. Now they're going big with N2X, but because that's delayed, probably a year after that's out, they will be preparing like the A14 Zen 7 server stuff for a year or so after that, like late 28. And so, yes, prices could be bad, but you know, these are all using different nodes. You see what I'm getting at here? By like late 28 or 29, you have A14 products for Zen 7 server. They're not using 2 nanometer for the PS6 or Xbox Helix. And that's important. PS5 launched at the same time pretty much as Zen 2 and around Zen 3, competing with the same nodes. This RDNA 1, RDNA 2 use the same node as PS5. That's not going to be the case. PS6 and Xbox Helix use 3 nanometer. Well, a lot of the most advanced stuff are using 2 and soon A14. And so while there will probably be a ton of demand, there could still be shortages. The fact that they're breaking things apart and what they use more, is probably going to make it less of an issue. And again, you never know. Like the AI bubble could be popping in a year from now. So there's a reason they would push back the Zen 6 launch. It's not just N2X. It's that timing it right is probably next year when RAM's cheaper anyway. So um, in other words, is the launch going to be terrible? Ask me in 6 months, man. It's way too soon to say. And I don't think it's inevitable that everything's terrible. It is never always inevitable. Dark Side of the Force writes in and says, at the current climate, I assume you meant, it seems like it is all about money and value. Do you think if AMD and Intel, do you think they'll be able to deliver value to their customers with Zen 6 and Nova Lake? Zen 6 is an incumbent platform, but it also uses Zen 2. Well, Intel is on a newer platform, but using not the lead. No. Nova Lake uses 2 nanometer. It uses the latest as well. And a ton more silicon and more complicated packaging. I don't think it will be wise to try to sell a $1,000 CPU and users are pinching their wallets. Yeah, I think that's a huge problem for Nova Lake. I brought it up a bazillion times that Zen 6 is going to cost substantially less to manufacture. And if Nova Lake is a $900 or $800 CPU and Zen 6 is a $700 CPU, Intel's fucked. I mean, you can't charge more for a CPU that requires a new platform compared to AMD. Like, it's just not going to go well. So we'll see. But again, ask me in 6 months. It's too soon to say what things will cost where and what availability will be. All we can say is Nova Lake definitely costs more to make than Zen 6. But we need final performance. We need to know what's going on with shortages. Ask me in 6 months. Benjamin Cannon writes in, ignoring volume, would you say ARL-R versus Zen 5 is similar to Bulldozer and Piledriver versus Sandy Bridge through Haswell? I mean, it's not a perfect analogy, but ARL-R and Piledriver were and are significantly more expensive to make than their competitor, use a lot more power, and price significantly lower than the initial launch. Remember, the FX9 590 had a $900 to $920 MSRP, but then fell to $300. Even though it was significantly behind in single threading and even lacked hyper threading compared to Intel. It's a less extreme version, but I don't know. It's kind of similar. I mean, yeah, it's kind of true. I mean, AMD is gonna. Well, we'll see if they do. If it doesn't sell, they don't get away with it. And I guess we don't know the volume, but AMD is going to attempt to charge $900 for a flagship. That's like what? I guess it's going to be like 30-40% faster than the 2070K plus in gaming. But in terms of single threading, same, multi-threading, same. So, that does show you we're kind of in a similar situation. And also AMD will probably use less energy because, again, no one talks about this. Arrow Lake Refresh gets more performance by using more energy from what I've seen in tests. I know why no one's pointing that out. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't have really anything else to say about it. Is it similar? Yes, but I've already made that comparison. I've said Meteor Lake was Bulldozer and Arrow Lake was Pile Driver. And Panther Lake is better than Excavator, though. So Intel seems to be getting out of it. Let me see. Do we have any other tipped questions here? All right. We're getting possibly to the final questions. If you have any more, I would say ask them now. So we'll start wrapping up soon. Would not 10% blanket. It's not 10% blanket. All right. Remaining questions here. All right. Another Chris writes in. Have you heard of a YouTube channel called Thread Interactive? This guy is highly convinced that games are unoptimized and does not apologize for it. I think that is the epitome of game devs should have kept making a better engine. I'll warn you that he is very vocal about his position. What? Thread Interactive having a big mouth? No way. Hasn't he pissed off like literally every YouTuber by just wanton attacking everybody? Look, man, here's what I'll say. Resident Evil 9 looks incredible. It looks incredible on the Switch 2. It looks incredible on a PlayStation. It looks incredible on a desktop. Battlefield 6 looks incredible. It looks incredible on all devices. It seems to run very, very well on whether it's an Xbox, a PlayStation, or a desktop. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I'm playing that right now. Looks great for what it is and what it requires to run it. So saying all games are unoptimized is like compared to what? What game is Threat Interactive made? Name it. What game? And I think we will compare how optimized his games are to real games. And then we can have a conversation. But until we can do that, it's just the pot calling the kettle black, man. Come on. Jesus Christ, get a life. Because you can only compare things to what's out there. And not all games are that optimized. Borderlands 4. But which actually has gained significant performance since its launch. So they have largely fixed the game. Although Borderlands was never a very efficiently run game. But I don't know. Resident Evil 9, Battlefield 6, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. What else is out there? There's other big games coming out. Like they all run great. So I don't know. I think plenty of games are optimized, and if they're not, you make a game and show me your game's more optimized, and then we can compare. But until someone makes their own game, I don't know what we're even comparing here. We're comparing a non-existent perfect thing to something that someone's just shitting on. Manolis Rakusis writes in, what do you think about Starfield finally coming to the PS5? Will you try it out? I don't know, guys. Starfield didn't get that much hype. I mean, I'll play it if it's free, but until then, I just don't. I've got to beat Kingdom Comes Deliverance 2. I might try to platinum Resident Evil 9. And I've got a huge backlog of games that I just have so many games. Such a backlog. So am I going to get Starfield? If you give it to me free, I might boot it up, and who knows, maybe I'll love it. But it's not something I'm looking to really do. I'm not hungry for tons more games right now. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. All right. Any final questions here? Silk Song. I've not played it, but I've heard it's very good. I wish I would have gotten a 5070 Ti over your 9070 XT. I mean, you wish you would have paid like $1,200. Like, how much is it? $1,000? Just keep in mind what it costs. Hi, Tom. Let me see here. Luke TV writes in and says, I'd like to ask how Sony plans to handle physical games in the PS6 handheld. My guess is that it's digital only. I don't know for a fact, but I would speculate it's digital only. If not, I do know there's an SD card slot, so they could do that. What would be funny is if the SD card slot was in both the PS6 base and the handheld, so you could switch your cartridge between them. That would be my dream. I don't even know if I would get the physical games. I'd probably still do digital, but I just think it would be fun if they let you move the cartridge between the PS6 and the PS6 handheld. But then it also had a disc player. I think that'd be very cool. But I think that's the most you're going to get, and it's probably digital only. Euroblue X writes in, thank you for the tip. Will you ever do PC display tech leaks? Probably not. I mean, it's just not something I pay attention to. And I do think this should be appreciated, guys. There's people that claim to be Nvidia leakers. Oh, I got an Nvidia leak for you once a year. Or the AMD leakers. Oh, talk about Zen 6. It's like, there's people that basically just leak things from one or two companies. There's PlayStation. Guys, I was the first to leak the specs of PS5 Pro with documents proving PSSR, the specs of PS6, Xbox Helix, including pictures of Xbox Helix, pictures and diagrams of Zen 6, Arrow Lake, Nova Lake, maybe not Arrow Lake, but Nova Lake, Strix Halo. For the love of God, I sorry, I think I can admit it now that I've been doing this for almost 10 years. I can just say it confidently. I am the most accurate and prolific leaker on AMD, Intel, PlayStation, probably Xbox, because no one bothers to leak Xbox stuff. That's a lot to cover. No, I don't plan to cover displays. It's already a lot to cover all of these companies at the same time. And to start trying to build that, I just don't see it. Not to mention, and this is just real politic here, I don't think it would get the views that a PlayStation 6 handheld leak would, a new OLED leak. Just being honest. Let me see. And also, doesn't the display stuff just kind of leak on its own? Don't these companies just accidentally leak display stuff all the time? Do we need any leakers for displays? Going for a true portable. Do you mean? I remember you saying Sony is going for a truly portable console. Do you think smaller than the Switch? My gut is no, because the market seems to want big handhelds. If they wanted to, they could make the PlayStation 6 handheld probably in between the size of the Vita and the Switch 2. My gut is it'll be about as big as the Switch 2, if not slightly bigger to fit, like, thick handles or something. So that's my guess. But yeah, because I think people are unfortunately saying they want big handhelds. And if you're going to make a truly, like, remember, guys, the PS6 handheld is a PS6. I don't even know if they'll call it anything special. My guess is they will just say PS6 handheld, and just you have to say handheld to let people know which one you mean, or they will call it the PS6P, the PS6 portable. And that's it, right? It runs PS6 games. So, unlike the Vita, they're going to have to make sure the controls work really, really well. Because, I mean, imagine trying to play Demon Souls on a Vita. You could, it works fine. Maybe a better controller than the PS3, right? But I mean, you're at a disadvantage if you get invaded by someone using a PS5 controller, a full controller. So my suspicion is, even if they shrink it a little, they're going to want to more or less have a full PS5 controller attached to it, and that alone is probably going to mean the thing is like as big as a Switch 2. That's what I think about the size. True scores. Do you know the raster lift with RDNA 5? Yeah, 10%. The raster IPC increase is 10% for same clocks, same CUs. And then ray tracing seems to be about double or more. That's what RDNA 5 is. So if you have 64 RDNA 5 compute units, it will perform like 68 RDNA 4 in raster. In ray tracing, 140 or something. Like, it's gonna be so much better at ray tracing. Best time to upgrade a PC. Honestly, a lot of the prices aren't that bad right now. Dead AI writes in, do you hear anything regarding OEMs versus Microsoft and Windows 11's current state? Windows on ARM is kind of dead. Chat right now with no one bothering about X Elite 2 release. Windows in general is also really shit. Much worse than Windows 10 days for sure. OEMs are mad at Microsoft. Everyone's mad at Microsoft. That's all I can say. I mean, I don't have anything specific besides that. And they all seem to regard Qualcomm as a flop. That's what that's going on with that. All right. Let me see if there's any final. PS6 handheld is real. Yes, of course it is. Where have you been? Let me see. Any final questions? Yes, but can you upgrade the Steam machine's memory? Yes, they've already said you can. Do you know if there's a 9950 X3D2 laptop equivalent? I'd kind of doubt it because Zen 6 is right around the corner and the mobile versions will launch before the desktop versions. We're already getting leaks of actual benchmarks of the mobile Zen 6. Those are probably launching at CES January next year. How much faster would the Zen 6 CPUs be? Anywhere from like 70 to 110% faster in multi-threading, and in single threading, I mean, let me do the math. Conservatively, Zen 6 and single threading will be 25%, but it could be as much as 25 to 40% faster single. So 70 to 110% multi-threading uplift, probably, just doing the scratch math in my head. 25 to 40% higher single threading. And then in gaming, I don't know, because there's a lot of latency reductions. So that, but I would say at least the single threading uplift. So yes, Zen 6 is that much faster. And again, to the people that are like, how are you doing this? Screw it. I'll just show you guys right now. Like this is how I did the scratch math. It's because there's going to be people that are like, Tom's overhyping Zen 6. Remember, I think Nova Lake's going to be like 30 to 50% more. Right? Like, well, no, I don't know about single threading, but like at least 20%, 30% more single threading than Arrow Lake, and doubling or more of multi-threading. So I think Nova Lake's gonna be a lot faster too. But let me show this screen here. So it's like, well, I don't know if it's 7 gigahertz. Burp. Divide that. Okay. IPC increase of 15%, 40. And then what if they only hit 6.5? Boom. 10% IPC increase. 25. That's it. So I did the math. Like, and I know it sounds crazy, but it's like, that's it. And then for the multi-threading, it will have 50% more cores at like at least 10 to 30% higher clocks. That's about double. That's it. That is how fast Zen 6 will be. I just did the math in front of you. It's gonna be crazy. Do you think Nova Lake has a chance to beat Zen 6? Yeah, chance, but it's a slim one. I mean, Zen 5 X3D is like what, 30 to 40% faster in gaming right now, and then Nova Lake's going to be 30% faster than that. So, well, 15 to 30%, or it could be 40%. It's going to be a lot faster than Zen 5 X3D at gaming. So, I mean, you tell me. Nova Lake's currently 35%, let's say, in gaming to AMD, and AMD is going to raise gaming performance probably by at least 20%. So do you think Nova Lake's 60% faster at gaming than Arrow Lake? Type in the chat, because that's what it's going to need to accomplish. Could it do it, especially with a new APO Plus thing I leaked? Yeah, maybe. I'm just saying, like, I just don't think enough people acknowledge the gulf Intel has to cross. It's like, just I don't say Nova Lake could beat Zen 6 in gaming. Say Nova Lake could raise gaming performance by 60%, and then see who listens to you in a forum. It could happen, but that's quite an accomplishment if they do that. That's all I'm saying. And again, I'm not a fanboy. I think they could. I mean, I know people at Intel are very excited about Nova Lake, so maybe. But just let's acknowledge that is what they would have to accomplish, which would be pretty big. It would be huge. That keep in mind a 60% uplift in gaming. What was Zen 1 from Pile Driver? Wasn't it like 50%? So you're saying this is a bigger uplift than Pile Driver to Zen 1. It could be. Nova Lake's supposed to be the big moment for Intel, but let's just be clear. That's what they would have to accomplish. Let's be very clear-eyed about this, about how behind they are right now. All right, I think that's going to do it, everybody. Remember to like someone says N1X ETA. I honestly almost don't think it's coming out anymore. I did, by the way, let me write down timestamp. Don't go. Let me write down one timestamp here, actually. This is something I can update you guys on. All right. N1X. I literally asked someone today who has had N1X for years in the hand. I said, how is N1X going? Person says still on hold. And I replied, damn, I gotta say, I'm kind of doubting if it's even gonna come out at this point. This person who has had N1X, the labs, for over a year, says, I agree, but they will not have a new GPU. So maybe they'll want to put that in the market next year. So it's not looking good. It's really not looking good. So when is N1X coming out? Be happy if it ever does. But it sounds like late Q3 if it does, like for back to school. Maybe if not early next year, competing with Zen 6 like Medusa Halo eventually. Like that just sounds too late. It sounds like they should just make a new APU at that point. And it should be like the Apple thing where sometimes Apple doesn't even release the first generation of what they're working on. They release the second or third, because it just wasn't ready. So that's how I'm kind of seeing the N1X at this point. But all right, I'm glad I was able to work that into the show. Now, everybody, almost 900 of you are watching. Click the like button. Also, double check, please, when you sign off, go to Moore's Law is Dead on YouTube and double check that you are subscribed to the channel. That helps the channel grow a lot when the algorithm sees the channel growing with subscribers. Also, share the video, comment below, and join the Patreon. I'm going to put out reader mails right now, or Telegram requests, I should say, for the next guest. The next guest is Colin Moriarty of Sacred Symbols. We'll be discussing all of this new PlayStation news and what's going on in the gaming business. The $1 tier can ask him questions. And of course, higher tiers get access to a Discord, the new die shrinks that have just come out. Also, our last 5 die shrinks are freaking bangers, by the way. Join the Patreon, multiple guest interviews. The new die shrinks are very good. Only patrons get access to them. And then also there's other ad-free other stuff you get as well. I'm falling asleep though. I'm getting tired. Thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for listening, and please have a good weekend.